Hello, I am Deborah Gravel with EBD Group, and today I am joined by Rose Higgins, the CEO of HealthMyne. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a delightful situation to be with you.
Wonderful. Now, tell us about HealthMyne. What capabilities and expertise does it provide, and what's its mission?
Well, HealthMyne is a software company that was started in 2013, really with the mission of trying to determine how do you get the best value out of imaging data. Healthcare data is obviously very vast, but a lot of folks don't realize that 90% of all healthcare data is imaging data. And our job and the mission that we set forth is to help us extract from that data all that's relevant and can be useful in helping our clients, whether those are hospitals and health systems or life science and biopharma companies, really learn more about what's going on with a particular patient based on the image and the detailed data that we're able to derive.
Great. And how does HealthMyne support life sciences real-world data strategies?
Well, part of what every life science company grapples with is an imaging pipeline. So as you can imagine, as you're developing different kinds of products and treatment strategies, you really need to have good clinical imaging to help you understand what's happening with the patient and the progression of any particular disease, and perhaps more importantly, its response to the therapies that you are actually trying to introduce. So the first thing we can help a life science company do is manage that imaging pipeline and do so in a way that's really very effective in curating the imaging data so that you begin to understand the nature of the data, not only at what you would see classically in a two-dimensional situation, but also a multi-dimensional scenario. So we look below the line. We often refer to it as an iceberg metaphor. So oftentimes when you look at a standard image, you see what's above the line, you see the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much more going on below the line, and that's really the field of radiomics, and that's the work that we really endeavor to do for life sciences, begin to reveal what's going on in that radiomic data and deliver that data for use in managing that imaging pipeline. Another area that we can help them with is in the trials world. And so oftentimes, again, when you're managing a clinical trial, each arm of the trial will have different individuals that are participating and images that are part of that process. So we're going through that process by curating that imaging information, revealing this yet to be discovered data, and providing that back to the trials team so they can really determine whether or not you're seeing response and overall what is the response to the therapy or the intervention that's being trialed.
You mentioned radiomics. Can you tell us what that is and how it can be leveraged by life sciences and healthcare organizations?
Sure. So radiomics is a relatively new field. It's been around for about 10 years in the literature and really only commercialized in the last half dozen or so years. And what it is really this looking within an image to find this data that you can't see in a standard image, whether that's a PET scan or an MRI or a CT scan. You really need to be able to look into the image, and we use artificial intelligence techniques to be able to help us go into the image and begin to pull out a variety of different kinds of metrics. So we start with an image analysis, and we go in and we determine within that image what are the relevant features that can be extracted. And so these radiomic features are really different elements of data that can be things that are related to volume or density or doubling time or texture and so forth. There's a lot of other additional data. In fact, we extract over 1,500 different features from any particular image. And then we take that information and we put it into the context of what's going on with that individual clinically. And that then is information that the life science and the pharmaceutical company can use, again, in managing their product development strategies, also managing their trial environments, and just really using data that didn't frankly exist until about 10 years ago. And that's the job. That's the work that we do, is to try to find that data and then to put that into the hands of those that can really use that data to get to true personalization. We hear a lot about personalized medicine, but an awful lot of that is really focused, and rightly so, on the world of genomic data. We're bringing different kinds of radiomic data, imaging data to that particular story. And you can imagine when you marry the two together, just how powerful that can be in truly getting to a personalization agenda.
Mm-hmm. And why would you say that radiomics is important then?
Well, I would say it's really the next field, as it were, of data that can be made available for organizations that are really trying to understand particular circumstances as they are, again, working with individuals clinically or working with individuals in terms of trial management, or simply trying to understand how to develop a product and when, for example, it might be time to perhaps change course because we're able to identify through this new data different things that may be occurring that you simply would not have been able to discern earlier. So it becomes really critical to have all of the data, and more importantly, not just the image itself, but what's going on below the surface, and using that AI technique allows us to be able to bring that to the fore and really inform a great deal more of what's going on in that treatment planning and that product development pipeline.
And how is it impacting and advancing cancer care treatment?
Well, we've seen some really wonderful real-world examples as we've worked with our clinical customers. So we have an awful lot of hospital and health systems, as well as academic researchers who've been using our tool for some time now. And we have a couple of examples which are really, frankly, they're a little bit breathtaking when you really understand what we've been able to do. In one example, and this is a set of examples from the same organization, where the use of the radiomic data in one circumstance, if you had just looked at the image, you would have imagined that there really wasn't anything progressive going on with this particular lesion, and it happened to be a lung cancer patient. And so if you had just gone on the basis of that, you would not have necessarily had any kind of procedural intervention or any kind of oncology change of therapy plan, et cetera. People would have thought that the lesion was stable and therefore there wasn't a need to do anything else. But in point of fact, when we looked at the radiomic data, we found that there was quite a bit going on, and there really was quite a bit of progression and growth. And this person really did need to have a procedure and a change in treatment therapy. We had another example in the same facility using the same team that looked at the data again and thought, well, it looks like this is growing on this two-dimensional view. But when we looked at the radiomics, we determined that there wasn't really anything that was needing to be attended to. And so this person really was stable, so they didn't have to have a procedure that was unwarranted. So if you think about that from the lens of value-based care, it's really critical to be able to make sure you have all of the relevant information when you're doing that treatment planning process. First of all, to make sure people are getting the right treatment every time, but also if they don't need that particular treatment, avoiding any kind of negative sequelae and obviously the cost and various other resource applications that are unwarranted.
Absolutely. And what role does radiomics play in the personalized health agenda?
Well, again, we think of personalized health as being really two sides of a coin. So everybody today has heard an awful lot about having your DNA mapped and your genome mapped and exactly what's going on with you individually. And that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is really what's happening structurally. So that's genomic data and molecular in nature. And what we're looking at is really phenotypic data. We're actually looking at the structural data of the particular lesion and the organ, and we're providing that information. So it's the other side of the coin. And when you bring them together, that's really the absolute value that you get in terms of making sure this is a very personalized circumstance and you can treat the person accordingly. It's for us, it's really the last mile to getting to a truly personalized health agenda.
Wonderful. And what would you say is the future then for radiomics?
Well, it continues to evolve. Obviously, it's a fairly new science. There's a tremendous amount of work going into trying to understand how do we take this radiomics and create what are called biomarkers. And then these biomarkers in turn, how can they be used to determine a clinical signature? Those then become highly predictive and prognostic in terms of how a particular course of cancer, for example, might evolve, but also what's the likelihood that a person is going to have a good outcome or not. And so we think that's the future, is continuing to evolve the science to help support developing more and more evidence base around both the role of the biomarker, the imaging biomarker, in driving both predictive and prognostic capability. And obviously, the more we can learn, the earlier we can learn, the better outcomes we can deliver. And so that's really the future in the area that we're trying to explore.
Very fascinating. And what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you or someone from your team at HealthMyne?
Well, certainly going through BioPharma America as one of the sites is an area for us. Also, the Partner One program is a place where you can seek information. And of course, we'd be delighted if you stop by healthmyne.com and take a look. And obviously, every one of us is available to you. You can reach us very quickly through that website.
Fantastic. Rose, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate it.